It is Monday, November 4th, 2024, and from Montreal, this is a special edition of Night Talk with yours truly, Gary MacDonald, and
yours truly, Eddie Tekalik.
Okay, so let's begin with a reminder, Eddie, that we welcome your comments on YouTube. Just log into the chat option to the right of the screen with your Google login or your Gmail login. They're basically the same, but anyway, whatever you have, that's all you have to do. And on Facebook, post your comment as usual. We will feature as many comments as possible during the live stream. Now, tomorrow is the official voting day in the U.S. presidential election. Both Republican former President Donald Trump and Democratic candidate Vice President Kamala Harris were hitting battleground states over the weekend, making their final appeals in what polls are showing is an extremely tight race. One, as I said last week, is a race where every vote will count. Trump has been talking about making America great again and accusing the Democrats of working to steal the vote, while also again making some violent comments, this time against the media.
And we got a phony press. We got a lot of crooked people out there. We're fighting like a son of a gun. We're fighting. They are fighting so hard to steal this damn thing. Look at what's going on. Look at what's going on in your state. Every day, they're talking about extending hours and stuff. Who ever heard of this stuff? We should have one-day voting and paper ballots. Then I just heard that a couple of states may go an extra 12 days. How the hell do you have an election? You know, they spend all of this money on these damn machines, and paper ballots should have the answer by 9 o'clock tonight. It's a damn shame. And I'm the only one that talks about it because everyone's afraid to damn talk about it. And then they accuse you of being a conspiracy theorist. These are conspiracy, and they want to lock you up. They want to put you in jail. The ones that should be locked up are the ones that cheat on these horrible elections. You know, it's a little strange. I'm a pretty smart guy. I have genetics. Do you believe in genetics? I do, you know. Fast racehorses produce fast racehorses, whether you like it or not. And but I'm a very.
Oh, all right. So he goes on in that clip to talk about all of a sudden he just veers off and he says, "I have a glass over here, I have a space here, and I have a glass here in front of me. And if anyone wants to take a shot, they have to go through the fake news in front of me. And I really don't care about that. That doesn't bother me a bit." Now, once again, and that's hard on the heels of the comment last week, Eddie, where he talked about Liz Cheney and putting her in front of a firing squad. Where is this guy coming from?
I don't know. Is he getting to a point of acts of desperation where he just wants to focus potential voters' attention in other areas as opposed to areas they're supposed to be focusing on? Seems to be a modus operandi, if you want to call it, in terms of how he speaks and what he decides to speak about, especially when he goes off script, off prompter. Getting them to, as opposed to look at what they're supposed to be looking at or listening to, oh, by the way, look over there, squirrel, and let's talk about the squirrel for a while. And I really don't know. You know, I was really hoping, since we were broadcasting last week, that, you know, during the last week's push, that concise, detailed, focused thought and commentary would have come out from former President Trump. In order to reel in some of those intelligent votes out there from intelligent voters, but he just seems to be going deeper and deeper and deeper in dangerous rhetoric and just going off on a tangent completely. And I guess what flabbergasts me the most in trying to keep an open mind to this is that no matter what he says, there is always a significant level of Um, the general population in the states that will ignore that and just say, "Oh, that's just Donald," but it's very dangerous and very undiplomatic rhetoric to be displaying in public, especially that first of all, everyone in the United States is watching this, and as I mentioned last week, equally important, the rest of the world is getting their news feeds from very, very credible news organizations in the world that I've talked to you about last week, and the international population is forging opinions, but more importantly, the leaders of the world are watching a lot, are watching and listening to a lot of this rhetoric and preparing themselves for a possible Trump win. And even more dangerous is the powers to be we consider autocratic and dangerous in the world are looking then at this and probably wringing their hands, saying, "Hey, wow, this is going to be great. Look who might potentially win." So I really don't know what he's trying to do or who he's trying to attract above and beyond the voter base that's going to vote for him no matter what. It just perplexes me.
Well, the polls are still showing a very, very tight race, and one of the latest polls had Harris pulling ahead by 1 percentage point. However, the margin of error, as they said, was one. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
no place to sneeze anywhere.
No. Now, a couple of other polls that were taken a few days before showed in one area that Harris had at least a 3 point lead over Trump. So it's still very fluid for those who have yet to vote. And, there's still, some of them may be still sitting on the fence for whatever the reason.
Right, right. And it's interesting you mentioned, a lot of voters that have yet to decide where they're going to be placing their votes. I've been doing a lot of research today and yesterday in terms of, what the votership is leaning towards. I'm especially interested in those that typically would have voted independent, but are still deciding on whether or not they should go to Mr. Trump or go to Ms. Harris. And in some cases, I heard a lot of interviews from folks that typically vote Republican, but they're able to see the individual that they'd be voting for in terms of somebody mentioned the humanity and humility in the individual, and they couldn't by good conscience vote for a person like that, a person like Mr. Trump. And for the first times in their lives, they're voting Democrat just to make sure Trump doesn't come into power. So I think there's a lot of individuals out there that are starting to realize what they would vote, what would happen with a vote for Trump might mean for themselves as citizens of the United States, and what might happen, more importantly, to the United States. And above and beyond trying to get commentary from the general folk online, there was also an interview I had watched with my wife today with Pete Buttigieg, and he did a sort of like a town hall where he was circled by 25 voters that did not know how they were going to vote. And, he was very attentive. He listened to what they had to say. He accepted what they had to say, whether it was critical or not, and gave them a very concise answer. So here you're looking at a young man, which gives me a lot of hope for the future of the politics in the United States. A very coherent, young, intelligent man, not afraid to sit on Fox panels, not afraid to sit in front of town halls and meet people face to face. I certainly wasn't expecting to get up and start playing Amazing Grace or anything like that and dancing to it. He stood his ground and he spoke to all people. Another interview I listened to very recently with him, I think his name is Neil Cavuto from Fox.
Yes.
And, Neil was trying to nail him on a few things and kind of paraphrasing into, "Oh, so you're basically saying that Trump's a fascist," and he basically responded very well and saying, "No, I agree with the general in terms of what he's saying about Mr. Trump being a fascist." And another one, just in closing that, the Fox interview tried to corner him into, and he basically said, "Oh, so I guess that you believe that people who support Trump are, I think he said, stupid. I think you believe that, they're stupid." And he kind of looked at him for a second and said, "No, I don't think I nor anyone else thinks that Trump supporters were stupid. I think," he said something to the effect of that they were being misled and they're basing their support by misinformation. These are misinformed people, and they have every right to vote the way they want to. But that's where the danger pretty much lies: is people being misinformed and making decisions based on this misinformation. So, just circling back to what Donald Trump is doing now in the last legs of the campaign, he just continues to spew out stuff that has absolutely zero to do with the future of the United States, and just spewing misinformation. And some media outlets continue to do that. Trump's platform is doing that. X under Mr. Musk is doing that, and then of course there's Fox continuing to promote misinformation. And
well, speaking of Fox, was it yesterday they were carrying one of his rallies, and some of the Republicans were complaining about the fact that Fox cut away because they said they couldn't really fact check a couple of the issues that Trump had raised in his speech, and how he just kind of goes off rambling, and they were really ticked off because Fox had actually cut away, and Fox has been a little tougher on him this time around than what they have been in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So, and also we do have a comment up from Greg Zed. Great points, gentlemen, but don't forget he has a following, and it appears there is a base, potentially the slimmest of a majority, that feel things were better when he was in, and he speaks to the old guard of made in America by Americans. This commentary, or thus his commentary about immigration and so on, Harris will need to get every one of her supporters out and vote. That is the old ground game, and it certainly is. And Greg, thank you for your comment.
Well said.
Yeah. Now, speaking of that just sparked something. Where was it here? Right. Okay. No, I lost my train of thought. So, anyhow, beyond that, both the campaigns have been spending a lot of money on ads. And we do have an ad that Trump is using. I think it was released yesterday. It's called Liberation Day. This is really something to see. Here we go. Are you ready for this one?
Nothing impossible adds nothing more than motivation.
Never, ever quit. Never quit. Adversity makes you stronger. Don't give in, don't back down, and never stop doing what you know is right.
They want to take away my freedom because I will never let them take away your freedoms. They're not coming after me, they're coming after you, and I just happen to be standing in their way.
When they couldn't beat him, they tried to bankrupt him.
President Trump is back in a New York City courtroom.
When that didn't work, they tried to put him in federal prison.
Raided by the FBI.
When that didn't work, they even tried to kill him.
He just tried to kill President Trump.
Donald Trump still stands, ready to fight, ready to win, and ready to make America great again.
This is Donald Trump's house, brother.
This election, we all get to choose. I'm going to choose real American leadership and a real American badass. The 45th and soon to be 47th President Donald J. Trump.
Starting on day one, we will defeat inflation quickly and we will make America affordable again. I will cut your energy costs in half.
It's time for the working man and woman to finally catch a break. We are going to bring back the American dream, bigger, better, and stronger than ever before.
When I'm back in the White House, we will restore world peace, and it will be again peace through strength.
I will launch the largest deportation program in American history. And we'll put these vicious and bloodthirsty criminals in jail or kick them the hell out of our country. November 5th, 2024 will be Liberation Day in America.
We all salute the same great American flag. Our best days are yet to come.
Together, we will make America great again.
Why do I feel like I'm watching a trailer for a movie?
I don't know if you went to see any movies lately, but yeah, that was a great trailer, and it actually great editing quality too. So good for them. But you know what? I mean, you look at some of the pieces in that, you kind of say, okay, great. They're promoting something good. No matter who the candidate was. But when they start speaking about immigrants again and targeting specific groups, and we're going to be doing this and we're going to be doing that, and that's where it becomes very scary for me. So I understand them putting a campaign or an ad like that, and I'm not sure where it's being played. It is dangerous in a way because it's just supporting everything he's been bullcrapping about on the microphone, and we'll talk about microphones later anyway. But yeah, it's just it just seems to just put everything he's been saying into a kind of neat package without the Trumpisms around it, and just delivering that message, just trying to deliver those messages as professionals as opposed to what he's actually saying during his campaign runs, right? So yeah, absolutely. It's almost like a prelude to a good movie,
Well, there are two things coming out of that ad. One, it reminded me of what I was going to say while reading Greg Zed's comment, and that is, if Trump had actually won the election the last trip around, he would have been in the middle of the post-COVID meltdown, which was an economic meltdown basically around the world. And
Right.
yet he keeps talking about it was all the Biden and Harris administration's fault that inflation, went out of control and interest rates went up, and you had shrinkflation and your dollar wasn't going as far as it once did. And nobody really seems to be challenging him on that particular comment, because there was nothing. That was like a snowball coming down a hill, totally out of control, and it was worldwide. And yet he hasn't been challenged on that particular comment. That's fine. And then the other thing of it was, during his speeches yesterday, in particular, he didn't really say, they stole the vote, but he talked in the first part of that clip, he was talking about the election and should go back to paper ballots, voting on one day, boom, boom. But in between the lines, you could see he was setting up his base of support for if he loses.
Yeah.
He didn't really lose. Again, it was stolen from him. And this has gone so far that today I was hearing reports of some of the polling stations around the voting booths around the U.S. in certain areas. They were setting up like fencing around them and everything, and they even had snipers on roofs around the building just in case. Like, is this the United States of America? Or are we in some kind of third world banana republic?
Well, we talked about this before. If the elections in the country that's supposed to represent the free world are so corrupt, and if you think about other places around the world with banana republics or whatnot, typically what ends up happening is very often the United States gets involved in collaboration with the United Nations, and they'll send in a peacekeeping force to make sure that the elections are run fair and square. And you kind of think about how ironic that is, where you have former President Trump basically saying before the elections actually happened that, like in 2020, the election is already rigged. I told you that the last two episodes, that this is exactly what was going to happen before the election happens. Oh, it's already rigged. And you know what? If it's so bad, ironically, don't you think the United Nations should send in some sort of a peacekeeping oversight committee or effort to make sure that the elections in the United States are fair and square? it's just so ironic to me, and you're right. I mean, to have to put riflemen and sharpshooters and fences around critical key point balloting areas is insanity, absolute insanity.
And the lawsuits have already started. They are preparing. And Trump made mention of that yesterday in one of his speeches about the fact that all of the voting facilities will have lawyers, all kinds of lawyers in there as well. Everyone's lawyered up over this whole thing. And this is just happening at just a few miles from us.
Right. And who's the Speaker of the House now? And they have an active. Let's say, for example, the Democrats do win with Harris tomorrow night and into the week. I mean, when the election gets certified in January, I believe that the individual in charge with certifying the U.S. election, it's very likely that the individual is not going to accept the election results as a result of all these lawsuits flying in. So, you know what, Gary, we have a very important evening tomorrow night. I guess we're all hoping for a landslide victory, which would minimize the corruption claims by Donald Trump and his group, meaning that it would be more difficult to not certifying the election come January and putting the rightful president in the White House, being Kamala Harris. But sorry, Gary, I had a technical issue here. What's going to end up happening instead, if it's a very close race, is this back and forth. Stay tuned every day, every week, and then everybody is going to hold their collective breaths come January to see what happens if the election doesn't get certified, right? So it's all. I mean, look, you and I, as Canadian citizens, and yourself as a journalist, we're all sitting on pins and needles up here. I know a lot of Canadian citizens. 1/3 of them are extremely interested in what's happening in the United States, because it will inevitably have a direct impact on our economic growth up here in Canada. So, you know what? We're all on pins and needles.
Well, let's move along. Meantime, Harris made a stop in Michigan over the weekend, where her message to the crowd was upbeat, really.
Because for freedom, including the fundamental freedom of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. And when Congress passes a bill to restore reproductive freedom nationwide, you know where I'm going. As President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. And here is my pledge to you. As President, I pledge to seek common ground and common sense solutions to the challenges you face. I am not looking to score political points. I am looking to make progress. And I pledge to listen to those who will be impacted by the decisions I make. I pledge to listen to experts. And I pledge to listen to people who disagree with me. Because, you see, I don't believe people who disagree with me are the enemy. In fact, I'll give them a seat at the table, because that's what strong leaders do. And I pledge to always put country above party and self, and to be a president for all Americans. And here's the thing, because you all have only known the climate crisis and are leading then the charge to protect our planet and our future. You who grew up with active shooter drills and are fighting to keep our schools safe. You who now know fewer rights than your mothers and grandmothers are standing up for freedom. None of these issues for you are theoretical. This is not political for you all. This is your lived experience, and I see you, and I see your power, and I am so proud of you. Can we hear it for our first-time voters?
Like I said, overall, listening to her speech, which was relatively short, it was very upbeat in a whole lot of ways. And of course, she was at a university stadium, I think it was at the time, and a lot of young people there. But really, really laying it out in a very positive manner. And I really think that's the second time I've heard about this generation voting, perhaps a lot of them for the first time. They're the kids that went through the active shooter drills at school, those sorts of things. I mentioned that last week on the show. A young university student here at McGill from the U.S. who's executive director of Democrats, I think, in Canada, and talking about everybody getting out to vote and getting a lot of the young people who have the ability or the right to vote for the first time. It's really important for them to get out. And again, he mentioned the fact that there are about 600,000 Americans living in Canada who have a right to vote in the U.S. And there was some concern about a possible postal strike this week, Canada Post, kind of slowing things down from that perspective.
Yeah, exactly. And as you were showing that clip of Kamala Harris speaking, what my mind went back to is the point I was trying to make earlier in the show, the absolute disparity between the quality of what the candidate was trying to communicate during their campaign run is night and day, really. I mean, you look at her and what she's trying to convey to not the people that already have decided they're going to vote for her, but for the individuals that are still up in the air in terms of where they're going to vote and place their vote. So those are the people she's trying to communicate and reach out to reason. Complete disparity from left field to right field in terms of how Mr. Trump handles his campaign speeches versus Kamala Harris. And going down to the next level below them, you look at what the vice presidential candidates have to say. And then even more than that, high-level supporters, when they get on network television, whether it's Fox or the incumbents ABC or out in European television, I have yet to see anyone, in my personal opinion, that would convey confidence, awareness, void of any sort of rhetoric or threats, come across an interview, as well as those that are supporting the Harris campaign. As I mentioned, Pete Buttigieg, he is articulate, very thoughtful, takes criticisms extremely well, says he's going to learn from it and move forward, and let's work together. The entire Harris campaign has been about stretching an arm across the floor, working Republicans to really making America great again, if you want to talk about it. Not that it was in a poor shape before, but I mean, that's what MAGA is all about, make America great again, but it wasn't that broken to begin with. Harris and her campaign and everyone that's supporting her are doing a great job in conveying the exact same message of hope, movement for the future, betterment of the American population, betterment of the country, in contrast to what Mr. Trump is doing with his campaign and his senior officials that are supporting the campaign, where it's just all about pointing fingers, pointing blame, not taking accountability, but we're going to fix everything. So, if somebody from another planet was looking down and that individual was all based on goodwill, good spirit, best of intentions, you look at both campaigns, this alien cannot go with the Trump campaign because it's void of any sort of value, human sentiment, which is rather unfortunate. I mean, if Mr. Trump wants to speak in that fashion, that's just his personality. But everybody else behind him speaking in that way just because that's what he does is unfortunate for his supporters and
the country.
And the country at the end of the day, and the country. And I reflect back to us here in Canada. Gary, I don't know about you, but I mean, some of the things that have been done by Mr. Trump in public, what he has said in public, a lot of us would be put in handcuffs, to tell you the truth, in terms of hate speech and, I'm not going to say hate crime, but at least arrested on the suspicion of hate speech. Wow.
Hate speech and threats. I mean, when you listen to the way he phrased the run that he took at Liz Cheney, I mean, that could be perceived as a threat. Would it be successfully prosecuted? I don't know. But it was a threat. It was an implied threat. The same as yesterday with they have to shoot through the fake news up there, and that doesn't really bother me one way or the other. Again, it's subtle, but it's a perceived threat overall. Now, while we're still with Harris, over the weekend, she received another celebrity endorsement, and this one, of all things, was from Harrison Ford.
Thought I'd do. Telling people I've never met who I'm voting for and why I think they might do the same. This election, I'm casting my ballot for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. Do I agree with every one of their policies? Of course not. Do I think they're perfect? Come on, for crying out loud, they're people just like you and me. But these two people believe in the rule of law. They believe in science. They believe that when you govern, you do so for all Americans. They believe that we are in this together. These are ideas I believe in. These are people I can get behind. Look, I'm frustrated about a lot of things in this country. I'm sure you are too. But the other guy, he spent 4 years turning us against each other while embracing dictators and tyrants around the world. That's not who we are. We don't need to make America great again. Come on, we are great. What we need is to work together again. What we need is a president who works for all of us again.
Yeah. He couldn't. I don't think he could put it. He could have put it any simpler. I mean, I know the pundits are going to say, "Oh, it was a paid. He was paid to say that," and he's an actor, so he put on a good show. But quite honestly, a lot of the individuals, a lot of celebrities, and a lot of former Republicans, or sorry, I stand corrected. A lot of Republicans today are crossing the line and saying, nope, I am a Republican, but not on Tuesday evening because I believe in my country. And I think that's what Harrison Ford was trying to say. I mean, you're looking at, high-ranking generals that served under President Trump. I mean, they're all up in arms against what he represents to the country. And these are military men, highly educated and decorated men. Their service to the Constitution. They understand the dynamics of warfare and governments, tyrannical governments. They're well historically versed, and they're all basically saying that Donald and what he represents is a threat to the country and the Constitution. And you know what? I mean, as intelligent individuals, when you have the people that are defending our country from atrocities around the world and the terrorism around the world saying that you know what, I'm doing my job, or former general saying, me doing my job properly, this man should not be in charge for reasons A, B, C, and D. So, you have generals, you have you have celebrities that are jumping ship. One of my favorite, Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's a devout Republican, has crossed the line and basically endorsed Kamala Harris. So it's not just one individual; it's a slew of steady Republican voters that are casting their vote for Kamala Harris for the good of the country, as far as I believe.
Yeah, we can get into a whole other discussion on celebrity endorsements, and for me anyway, for that, and I don't know, what is it, $5 to ride the bus here in Montreal? That's what it's worth to me. Like, I have it matters not what Harrison Ford or anyone else, whether they're in sports or in entertainment, where their loyalties sit. It's where my loyalties sit as I'm trying to make a decision. Now, comment here from Earl Dowling. Hopefully, if Trump wins in a landslide, things will go smoothly as well. I think you lean a little heavily to the left. I was hoping it would be a little in the center. Trample on the Republicans and promote Democrats. If you'd be more center, you would separate this from the leftist media. Okay, and point well taken. It has been where Trump's too easy, actually, to take a run at. However, let me say this. Stick around over the next couple of months, because we're going to be either into a snap federal election, or by this time next year, we will be in the regular election, federal election. And I can tell you right now, Justin Trudeau and Pierre Poilievre, along with Jagmeet Singh, are going to bear my wrath. I'll be straight down the middle on that one for sure, because it's going to be tough trying to hold my nose as I go into behind the cardboard screen to mark an X on the ballot. Because right now in Canada, I'm sorry, but we are shagged any way you look at it, with the three leaders of the three parties, the three major parties in this country. But that's a whole other show, and I'll just kind of come down on that a little bit. But thank you, Earl, for your comment. Point well taken overall, and I can totally understand where you're coming from with that, based on the conversation we've been having this evening. Okay, and let me see, I think we had another comment. We do. Okay. So let's bring this up. We do that. Oh no, we do this. And we do this. And then we do that.
There we go.
Yeah, from Doug Epton, my fear is that if Trump loses, money buys a whole lot of stupid, and he can buy his lunatic diehard supporters to take her out. And they gladly will for a promise of a payday. Whoa! Whoa! I'm not even sure how to respond to that one, Doug. Wow.
Well, I think we both certainly hear there won't be any blazing guns after this particular election, one way or the other. I think I can speak for both of us, Gary, I think, on this one. But I can see where Doug is coming from in terms of, I guess, some frustrations, right?
Well, if you go back to January 6th, a day that Trump called a love day, or a day of love, I guess it was, here recently.
It was a love fest.
Yeah. I was watching some video from that again over the weekend, and I remember when that whole thing went down, and all of a sudden, we start getting the video in from it, and like, I could not believe that this was happening just south of our border, that there was this kind of an insurrection on the capital of the United States. It just, and I still have not been able to, I don't think, to be able to really fully comprehend that, because every time I see video on it, and listened to some of the comments that were being made on that particular day, I hear something new. And what I hear, it's not great overall, for sure. So, we have one more little comment to add here, and let's bring that up from Doug. Oh wait, he doesn't pay his contractors. Doug's wanting to stir the pot tonight. Yeah. So, he's talking about tariffs too, and far be it from me to even remotely try and convince anyone that I'm any kind of an economic expert, because I'm not. I'm totally out of my league in that respect. When you get down into the actual counting of the beans and what have you. But the fact of the matter is, he's talking about the tariffs, and what we're not hearing on that aspect yet anyway is the impact that that's going to have on the world economy, and on, more specifically on the Canadian economy as well. He puts tariffs on, and it's going to make goods coming into the country eventually, if not almost immediately, goods that are coming into the country much more expensive. Now, I get where he's coming from when he says we want to bring that manufacturing home, and we want to bring those American jobs home. I get that. And you know what? On that point, I will say that I think it's time that we all should be making a commitment. We've lost all of our manufacturing, most of our manufacturing offshore. Yeah. And at the time, because it was cheap and easy. But we also saw how dependent our supply chain in this country, in the United States, and even, in Europe and elsewhere in the world, how tightly tied our supply chains were to all of that offshore manufacturing and supply. And it was not a pretty picture, especially when we had the pandemic and all of the restrictions brought on by the pandemic. I think that we have to really start, as governments, national governments have to start looking at how do we encourage more manufacturing, bring more manufacturing back on, onto our shores here, and yes, create more jobs, and at what cost, and how is that going to impact prices in Canada? How is it going to impact prices in the U.S.? We know there will be a higher price point overall, because the costs are higher when you get into various things as far as taxes and here in Canada, the social programs. So I would personally, and I've said this since the first time that I saw that our supply chain was breaking down in the early days of the pandemic, and I've said, we really have to get our acts together and look at ways to start moving it back. And we ended up paying inflated prices at the peak of inflation over the last year or so for things like groceries and other things. And every time you see a price going up, the finger still pointed at, it's the result of the pandemic and the shortages and, companies behind on manufacturing.
Right.
Great. Which makes the case even stronger that a lot of it should be at home on our shores and not sent overseas. And does it mean that the profit margin will be slightly less? Yes. Does it mean that the prices we pay as consumers will be a little bit higher? Yes. But also more Americans, more Canadians will be working and working in the manufacturing sectors, and our supply chains will be more solid. We won't be as vulnerable to outside influences as we are now.
Right, absolutely. And you know, right at the onset of your piece here, Gary, you had mentioned about a lot of conversation and a lot of the Trump campaign is based on tariffs, and there is a consistent message out there, although incorrect message, is that with strength and with force, I'm going to put tariffs on all these countries. Point stop, full stop. And what that does is exactly what Pete Buttigieg is saying is there's information that's going out there. Yes, he's going to impose tariffs, but he stops there. What people don't generally know is when the Republican campaign says we are going to tariff everybody, they don't understand that this is not another country that's going to pay for tariffs. I think that there's a misconception, a general misconception by a lot of population, whether it's Republican or Democrat or even a lot of folks up here in Canada. Tariffs are not paid by other countries. Tariffs are paid by companies within your own country that have to pay tariffs on anything they import from another country. So, I'm going to impose tariffs on China. Well, China is not going to pay a dime, right? This is all put on the buyers in America or in Canada, and in order for them to offset their costs. And again, I'm not a financial expert, but the way I understand it, in order for buyers in North America to offset their costs as a result of paying higher tariffs to the government for buying imported goods, that's going to be handed over to the retailers, the wholesalers and retailers. So at the end of the day, it's the poor schmo at the end of the line, the voter, that's going to end up paying more for their goods. That's the first point I wanted to make. So it's accurate information with misinformation. Higher tariffs, I'm going to tariff everybody to the yin yang, but I'm not going to say that it's our people that are going to end up paying for it, right? And the other very important piece, Gary, you'd mentioned is all this offshoring, and this goes back to my telecom days from years and years and years. I was the witness of a lot of offshoring, and I worked for a huge aeronautical telecommunications company in the airline industry. We started doing the same thing, offshoring. And I'm not knocking on the capability of these offshore organizations on whether it's manufacturing or technology-based services. Some very good people out there. Look, it's cents to the dollar when it comes to salary. So, this is I've been involved with situations where the company mandate was to offshore to enhance service, which is what we basically conveyed as communication. But at the end of the day, it was to save money, and just too much of this technology services element, or as you mentioned, manufacturing, whether it's just plain ground resources or high-end resources or whatever you're buying overseas. A lot of this stuff used to be made in Canada, and it used to be made in the United States of America. And at the end of the day, it was the bottom dollar. How can we squeeze more oil out of a rock? Well, offshoring sounds good because I'll be paying this guy 10 cents to the dollar that I don't have to pay here. So I think you're absolutely right. We should bring back a fair chunk of this with a concise plan of doing so without costing the consumer at the end of the day a hell of a lot more money. And that's where it comes down to companies and what the government can do to support companies to inshore or bring back these manufacturing jobs or these technology jobs that used to do very well here in Canada. It just disappeared because of pure economics, right?
It used to bother me when I was living in St. John, and you'd look out on the bay and you would see all kinds of oil tankers out there waiting to offload to keep Canada's largest oil refinery going. And a good chunk of what's produced there actually ends up going to the Northeast US market. But still, it's Canada's largest oil refinery. And most of the crude that they receive at that refinery is all offshore crude. The money's going out of the country, and we're not really getting a whole lot of benefit from it. And yet we had a proposal a few years ago for the Energy East pipeline to bring in the heavy oil from the tar sands out in Alberta. And between environmentalists and issues with First Nations, that got nixed. Oh, and Quebec too. Quebec didn't want it going through this province for whatever the reason. Anyway, and it bothered me because the results of a second refinery, state-of-the-art refinery planned for the St. John area, if Energies had gone through. The refinery that's there now, it's been a pain in the butt at times, and from an environmental perspective, but Irving has spent a lot of money over the years on upgrades to that refinery and trying to be ahead on the technology side of things and producing cleaner burning fuels. And yet we have the resources, and they're now bringing some of the heavy oil in from out west by train, tank cars. Mm-hmm. And of course, we remember, about 6 years ago, or is it 10 years ago now, Lac Mégantic.
Yes, a little over 10 years.
Yeah, and, it could have been all rolling in a pipeline from Alberta straight down to New Brunswick and into the refinery. I just...
It would have made it easy, yeah.
Yeah,
and don't forget,
and the money was staying on shore here.
Absolutely. I mean, think about a transcontinental pipeline like that coming in from Alberta, which I believe Canada has got the third largest oil reserves in the world, third or fourth. I mean, that's a lot of raw material, heavy crude to be refined. It keeps employees, it keeps people employed from coast to coast in that particular regards, and it justifies the well-spent money out east in terms of beefing up the refinery to handle the load. It's just it's a win-win-win scenario for Canadians, and it's a win-win-win scenario for the Americans who are purchasing good quality, quickly delivered fuel, right?
Yep, and also in the Eastern Canadian market for sure. I mean, Irving services all of Atlantic Canada, services parts, or they're into Quebec, and I think they even have some stations in at least Eastern Ontario. So, and they have a presence, or they did have a presence as far as office space is concerned out in Calgary as well, and especially when they were working on the Energy East pipeline proposal. That was a huge project that went down the tubes. But anyway, that's getting away from the topic at hand here this evening, for sure. Any final thoughts, Eddie?
You know what? As I mentioned last week, I am very hopeful that the smarter heads will prevail in the United States. I think I try to take a moderate view, a moderate stance, whether it's a little left or a little right. I have a hard time with extreme right and extreme left, so I try to look at things as moderately as I possibly can. In general, I think that Republican citizen or Democrat citizens in the United States are good, solid, moral, law-abiding people. Let's not get us wrong here. And I think what we're dealing with here is a lot of extremist rhetoric, which could be very dangerous for the individuals who are good citizens, regardless of what side of the center they are. So closing statements. I really hope people vote with their conscience. I hope they vote with their intelligence, based on good information, upfront information, and do what they think is absolutely right for them and the country first. So I think we'll be holding our breath, not just for one evening tomorrow. I think we'll be holding our breath for quite a few weeks. And if in the event there is a victory by Kamala Harris, which is going to be turning a page on history in the United States, where we'll have the first female president of the United States of America, leaders of the free world, as they like to call themselves. Really hopeful that at the end of the day, an individual who has a responsibility to certify the election, House Speaker Mike Johnson, that's the name I was looking for before, that he actually does the right thing and he does certify an election that was run fairly. So we'll just hold our breath and collect our breaths and see what happens over the next little while. And let's just hope nobody gets hurt in the next little while, whether it's before the election, after the election, or before the inaugural ceremonies in January and thereafter. Everybody stay safe, no violence. Those snipers on top of roof.
And I see
won't have to use their rifles. Let's just.
I see Videotron is giving you some issues again this evening. We must be getting into peak usage
yes,
time.
They are. Yep.
Yeah. So,
Probably.
Well, anyway, Eddie, the next couple of days, maybe even weeks, as you say, will be interesting, and the impact on Canada and the rest of the world can either be more positive or bordering on disaster across a number of fronts. Now, we will be back on Wednesday evening with our weekly show, and no doubt there will be more focus on the outcome of the election south of the border. Thank you for checking in this evening, and please like, subscribe, and share to help grow our channel. And remember to tune in Wednesday evening at 7 Eastern Time. Good night from Montreal.